Hi, I'm Eric B Vogel, the designer of Kitara, and I'm here to teach you how to play the game. In Kitara, you play the ruler of a small kingdom in the Great Lakes region of ancient Africa. Your goal is to reunify the once great Kitara Empire, competing with rival kings who share the same ambition. Put the game board in the center of the table, using the correct board and side for the number of players. Randomly assign the first player marker to one of the players. Each player chooses a player color and takes the kingdom sheet as well as the complete set of pawns and markers in that color. Each player places their kingdom sheet in front of themselves on the table, placing their supply of pawns below their kingdom sheet. Starting with the first player and proceeding clockwise, each player places 3 of their warrior pawns into one of the unclaimed start spaces on the board. Each player places their score marker on the 0 space of the score track. Choose one of the 2 kingdom decks to use in the game, blue or red, and put the other deck back in the game box. We recommend using the blue deck for your first game. Sort the cards into separate piles by the age number at the bottom of the card. Give each player one of the age 0 cards and put any leftover age 0 cards back in the game box. Each player places their age 0 kingdom card to the right of their kingdom sheet to form the start of their kingdom, their card display. Shuffle each of the remaining piles separately, then stack them face down in order so that the age 5 pile is on the bottom and the age 1 pile is on the top. Place this stacked deck face down above the right end of the game board, and then deal a row of 6 kingdom cards face up along the top of the game board. Put the hero tokens in the bag, and now you are ready to play. Each player on their turn plays through all 5 phases of their turn: draft, recruit, move, score, and manage. In the draft phase, the active player selects one kingdom card from the card row and adds it to their kingdom. The active player counts the number of card symbols in the first row of their kingdom cards. This is the number of cards the player has to choose from, starting at the left end of the card row, the end furthest from the deck. At the beginning of the game, all players have 2 card symbols. This means they can choose a card from either of the first 2 cards of the row. After a player drafts a card, the remaining cards shift to the left and a new card is turned face up from the deck at the right end of the row. In a 2-player game only, the player also discards the leftmost card of the row before shifting the cards left and refilling the row back up to 6 cards. This is the only rule change for the 2-player game. The second row of symbols on kingdom cards indicates the number and type of pawns that the card will add to the game board. These new pawns are added to the board when the kingdom card is first drafted. Old cards do not add new pawns every turn. The new pawns are placed in the board spaces the player currently occupies according to the player's wishes. The third row of symbols on kingdom cards shows how many movement actions the active player can take. Each symbol allows the player to move one group of any number of pawns from one board area to an adjacent board area across a white border. The brown bordered lake areas are impassable. All pawns in a space do not have to be moved, and the same pawns can be moved multiple times per turn. At the start of this phase, the active player places their movement marker on the leftmost movement symbol in their kingdom, and then moves it onto the next symbol to the right with each movement action taken. This will help the player keep track of how many movements they have used during their turn, which is helpful once players acquire several movement symbols. Attacking occurs during the movement phase, whenever the active player moves into a board area occupied by an opponent's pawns. It is not possible to move into or through an opponent's pawns without attacking. The active player may only attack using a group with at least one more pawn than the group of opponent pawns occupying the target space. That is to say, attacks must always be made with a superior number of pawns. If an opponent only occupies one board space, that space may not be attacked. If the attacking group includes at least one hero pawn, then the active player gets to draw one hero token from the bag and keep it number side down on the table near their kingdom sheet. Hero tokens are worth 2 to 5 victory points each. The active player may look at their hero tokens, but must keep them secret from their opponents. When the active player attacks a board area, the attacked opponent must immediately retreat. The opponent moves all pawns from the attacked board area to one of the nearest board areas the opponent still occupies. If multiple areas are equally close, the opponent chooses which to retreat to. The area retreated to does not have to be adjacent, and the opponent may retreat through areas occupied by other players. After a retreat occurs, the active player may resume taking movement actions. The active player looks through any hero tokens they acquired that turn without showing them to the other players. One of the highest value hero tokens taken that turn is placed face down on the player's kingdom board to be kept until the end of the game. The other hero tokens taken that turn are put back in the bag. Players can get at most one hero token per turn, but attacking multiple times in a turn gives a player a better chance of drawing a high value token. The values of each player's hero tokens are kept secret until the end of the game. For each ruin space that the player occupies with at least one master animal pawn, the active player scores 2 victory points. The fourth row on kingdom cards contains victory point symbols. For each victory point symbol on their cards, the active player scores 1 victory point. Each card in a player's kingdom has to be fed at the end of their turn. For each savanna space the player occupies with at least one warrior pawn, the active player can keep 1 card. If the player has more cards than warrior-occupied savannas, they must choose cards to discard until their number of cards and occupied savannas is the same. For each pawn symbol on the cards discarded, the active player must remove 1 pawn of the same type from the board and return it to their supply. Certain cards in the red deck are marked with a crop symbol. These cards do not have to be fed and cannot be discarded. The end of the game is triggered when the first Age 5 card is turned face up in the row. When this happens, play back to the starting player and then all players take 1 final turn. Players turn their hero tokens face up and add the combined value of these to their score. Players then score 2 victory points for each kingdom card they kept until the end of the game. The player with the most points wins. If there is a tie, the tied player with the most hero tokens wins. If there is still a tie, then the tied players share their victory. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed Kitara.